In color, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. And Eric Severide in Washington, Dan Rather in Washington, Bill Plant in Cleveland, Don Webster in Saigon, and Ike Pappas in Omaha, Nebraska.
Good evening. President Nixon tonight makes his much publicized policy speech on the Vietnam War. CBS will broadcast it live beginning at 9:30 Eastern Time. From the White House, we have a report from CBS News correspondent Dan Rather.
The President considers tonight's address a watershed for his administration. He hopes and believes that when it is over, he will have accomplished two goals. Number one, hold a majority of the American people behind his policy of attempting a slow, orderly, honorable winding down of the war, regardless of what happens in Paris. Number two, convince Hanoi and the Viet Cong that despite happenings such as Moratorium Day, he can resist demands for one-sided concessions which, he believes, would amount to surrender. Beyond this, guessing what he may say tonight is work for prophets, not reporters. There are plenty of guesses around town that he may talk about stepped-up U.S. troop reductions. This speculation is fed by comments such as those made today in Atlanta by House Republican leader Gerald Ford.
I believe that the program that we are following at the present time in Vietnam will lead to a substantial withdrawal of U.S. military personnel so that by a year from now, there will be over half of our military personnel withdrawn, and perhaps more, and that group that have been withdrawn will be principally the combat forces that have been in Vietnam for the last 3 years.
Other Republican congressional leaders have talked about trying a ceasefire. The President, many guess, will at least mention that tonight as a possibility. Mr. Nixon's rationale for trying or not trying a ceasefire could be one of the highlights of the speech. Many Republican congressional leaders have urged the President to detail how his administration has changed Vietnam policy from the Johnson years, to spell out all he has done for peace, contrasted with what the other side has not done. The President is much aware of the pressure that the immense buildup this speech places on him. His major concern is that the public not feel let down once the speech is over. He has spent much of today memorizing key parts of the address. He is determined not to just read what he considers to be a crucial presidential case for unity. Dan Rather, CBS News, Washington.
Earlier today in Saigon, President Thieu made no direct reference to Mr. Nixon's speech, but he repeated what has become a frequent theme in his recent statements, that the South Vietnamese must rely increasingly upon themselves in fighting the war. Thieu also declared that his own forces are near victory over the communists, and he denounced as stupid some South Vietnamese politicians who now are advocating a neutral policy for Saigon. Also in advance of Mr. Nixon's address, the Viet Cong warned that the war will go on as long as there are U.S. troops in South Vietnam. The guerrillas, in a broadcast over their underground radio, referred to the Thieu regime as a corrupt administration, which, in their words, the South Vietnamese people plan to topple.
When you begin to tire out and you're feeling pooped, try the brand new stimulant, Vivarin. Vivarin is new and so effective, too, yet it's gentle to your system. What a lift for you when you face so many of those tiresome chores, when you've had too much of a job outdoors. If at times you feel yuck, here's the stimulant to know. Give yourself a lift with new Vivarin. Vivarin. Give yourself a lift with new Vivarin. Vivarin.
She dreams again of the man she met. Something about him she can't forget.
There's something about an Aquavelva.
The aftershave girls can't forget. Aquavelva. Have you tried it yet?
There's something about an Aquavelva.
Famous ice blue, manly redwood, or cool frost lime. Try all three ways to bring out the Aquavelva man in you.
In the war, American troops reported beating back enemy assaults on 2 military posts 300 miles north of Saigon. They said 26 communists died in the fighting at a cost of 1 American killed and 8 wounded. There were no new reports of action near the Cambodian border, 100 miles from Saigon. North Vietnamese artillery attacks in that area forced Allied troops to abandon 3 artillery bases over the weekend. The intensity of the Vietnam fighting has dropped sharply. But there has been no softening of the bitter enmity between the two sides, and on occasion it reaches the point of savagery. The following scenes contain such an example. Don Webster narrates.
The soldiers are South Vietnamese Army regulars. The helicopters are flown by American pilots. The door gunners who strafe the area with fire before landing are also Americans. Once they land, the South Vietnamese begin to sweep the area. About 200 soldiers were on this particular mission. With them were 6 American advisors, including several officers. After several hours of searching through rice paddies, the troops stopped for a short break. Just as they were drinking water, sniper fire opened up from several bunkers nearby. Everyone fled for cover. As some of the South Vietnamese troops cautiously advanced, one of the enemy soldiers threw a hand grenade. It didn't hurt anyone and instead gave away the communist position. Moments later, the South Vietnamese were throwing hand grenades of their own. After some fierce fighting, at least 8 enemy were seen running away. You are about to see one of those atrocities that takes place from time to time in war. The South Vietnamese had killed 2 North Vietnamese Army regulars, as it turned out, and wounded 1 other. The wounded man was dragged to an open field. Technically, at this moment, he's a prisoner of war. Then, one of the South Vietnamese decided they would take no prisoners today. CBS News has film of what happened next. We will not show it. Suffice to say, the body of the dead man was slit open. The mission continued, the soldiers unencumbered by having to guard any prisoners. Some of the American advisors were present when the killing took place, although it's debatable whether they could have moved quickly enough to stop it. Don Webster, CBS News in South Vietnam.
In Cairo tonight, Palestinian commandos and Lebanon announced full settlement of their conflict over Arab guerrilla attacks against Israel from Lebanese bases. The agreement follows a ceasefire that ended 2 weeks of fighting between the Lebanese army and the guerrillas. Tonight's announcement did not indicate how much freedom of movement the Palestinians would continue to enjoy in Lebanon. There's been speculation that the Beirut government, if nothing else, might permit Syrian-based commandos to use a corridor through its territory for strikes against Israel. From Washington, CBS News diplomatic correspondent Marvin Kalb reports that administration officials feel that the situation in that area is just as explosive as ever. Further guerrilla raids, they believe, could bring swift Israeli retaliation against both Syria and Lebanon. Biafra hinted tonight that it would be willing to give up its 28-month-old fight to secede from Nigeria if the security of its people could be guaranteed. The spokesman said there could be a compromise on full Biafran sovereignty, and he said his government is willing to listen to any alternative suggestions. Some observers said this could mean the Biafrans would accept an economic federation with Nigeria while retaining their own identity and army, but they doubted that Nigeria would accept such an arrangement. The UN General Assembly began its annual debate on the China issue today, and 17 nations, led by Cambodia, called for the seating of Red China and the ousting of Nationalist China. The proposals all but certain to be rejected, as it has been in previous years. The Nationalist Chinese foreign minister told the Assembly that the Peking regime has sought only to enslave the Chinese people, and that matters now have reached the point where it has lost control over wide areas of mainland China.
Anytime, anywhere the fun is, you light up at Kent, and the good taste happens.
What a good time for a Kent!
At Del Monte, when the call rang out for a better canned fruit cocktail, we came a-running. And ran right into trouble. It wasn't easy to get the best of 5 fruits in one can, but we didn't let that stop us. And now Del Monte Fruit Cocktail is one of our most heartwarming success stories.
Del Monte Fruit Cocktail, one of Del Monte's 174 success stories.
A high administration official said today that President Nixon's first federal budget for fiscal year 1971 probably will exceed $200 billion. And that'll be for the first time in the nation's history. And there may not be a surplus in it. The official said that in spite of general cost-cutting efforts, the new budget, still in planning stages, likely will run about $10 billion more than this fiscal year's $193 billion. The Senate's Democratic leaders said today they will try to increase the personal income tax exemption when the tax reform bill reaches the floor, probably later this month. Senator Mansfield said he would like to see the $600 exemption increased to at least $1,000. And Senator Kennedy said he too would like it raised, but he gave no specific figure. The American Medical Association today proposed a nationwide health insurance plan based on tax credits. It was offered as a replacement for Medicaid, but would not affect the Medicare program for the aged. Dr. Russell Roth explained the proposal, called MediCredit, to a House hearing. It would allow taxpayers to deduct a portion of their health insurance costs from their income taxes. The government would pay the entire cost for the lowest 30% of the taxpayers, according to this doctor's plan. The amount of deduction for the others would vary according to their tax brackets. Just 50 years ago, a governor of Massachusetts named Calvin Coolidge won national attention when he ended a Boston police walkout, saying there is no right to strike against the public safety by anybody, anywhere, anytime. In the words of one man calling for a police union today, this is 1969, not 1919. But when police representatives met in Omaha this weekend to form the International Brotherhood of Police Officers, they were careful to include a no-strike pledge. Ike Pappas reports.
In effect, the National Police Union was born this past weekend in Omaha when a constitution was drafted by some 30 policemen representing 12 cities across America. While opponents of the idea saw unionization as an attempt by police to grab power and influence on a national scale, New York's John Cassese denied this and pointed out the advantages of organizing lawmen into one union.
All these different police groups lobby in their own states and in their own cities. And when you get nationalized in one union, that would be the lobby in Washington, D.C. to take care of police problems. Try and pass laws and lobby for laws that are beneficial to policemen. And at the same time, fight laws that are detrimental to the welfare of the policemen.
Well, is this move for a national police union, do you see it part of an attempt to gain national influence on the part of the police?
Well, that wouldn't be the one idea, but as a result of unionizing, this will come about because it will mushroom. But that doesn't mean that we're boogeymen. No, remember, we're still policemen. We'll still protect the people, but at the same time, we've got to protect our own interests.
Well, there's another fear that goes along these lines, that if the policemen organize on a national level, that there's a possibility this might develop into a police state.
No, let's be foolish. Now, that's far from the truth. It'll never come about. We're only organizing to protect our own interests. And that's about the size of it. It'll never become a police state. And those are statements that come from people who are against the unionization of policemen. And they have to make some drastic statements so they scare everybody into becoming a police state. This is furthest from the truth. We're American citizens. We live in our own locality. We're policemen. We pass an examination. We want to protect the people. We put our lives on our line. We're ready to get shot. We're ready to get stabbed. We're ready to die for the safety of the people. Don't make us a big boogeyman with a police state.
Would there be any guarantees in the Constitution which would perhaps obviate that possibility?
I don't think you need it in the Constitution. It'll never come about.
There are 400,000 policemen in the United States, and each one of them is now faced with the question of whether he wants to be unionized this way. For after the events of this weekend, a national police union is just a few short steps away from becoming a reality. Ike Pappas, CBS News, Omaha.
Those short steps include approval by the AFL-CIO Executive Council before the union constitution is circulated among police groups around the nation. Authorities removed the gag and handcuffs from defendant Bobby Seale at the Chicago Convention conspiracy trial today. The Black Panther leader continued to demand permission to defend himself, but his protests were considerably more temperate than the outburst which led to physical restraints last week. It's not certain tonight whether the United States or Italy will have the final say in the case of Rafael Minichiello, the 20-year-old Marine accused of hijacking that TWA jetliner from California to Rome. In Rome, an Italian prosecutor said Minichiello will be tried there on 8 charges, ranging from kidnapping to carrying weapons of war. But in New York, the federal government began presenting its case to a grand jury, charging Minichiello with air piracy and kidnapping. The government's expected to seek his extradition from Italy, but the U.S. Embassy in Rome said it has not yet received an official request. CBS News correspondent Stephen Rowan has learned that a central figure in the Senate probe of Army graft has made official inquiries about retirement. Sergeant Major William Wooldridge, a veteran of 28 years and once the Army's top-ranked enlisted man, has asked whether he could apply for an honorable discharge. A colleague, Sergeant William Higdon, also is seeking to retire. Rowan says Pentagon sources indicate the request might not be granted pending possible court-martial action.
It doesn't take a lot of money to buy a 1970 Ambassador. It just looks like it does.
Hey, Ma! Pa! Joe's got a new car!
Boy, Joe, that's terrific. Hey, how do you like this big shot? A couple of years out of college and he's buying expensive cars.
Joey, you need such an expensive car.
CPAs make money. Right, Joe?
Hey, Mom, it didn't cost so much. Hey, Richie, get the sneakers off the seat, will you, please?
Oh, Joey got air conditioning!
Joey, so fancy.
Come on, the Ambassador comes that way. Hey, come on, let's go for a ride, huh?
Joey, the way I'm dressed.
You look beautiful. Come on.
Bravo, Joe.
Hey, Mrs. DeVoto, my son is air-conditioned.
That's nice.
The Ambassador is still the only car in its class with standard air conditioning. That's class.
Gubernatorial races in New Jersey and Virginia highlight tomorrow's off-year elections, and President Nixon has campaigned personally for the Republicans in those contests. Also featured are mayoralty races in some of the nation's big cities, among them New York, where late polls show incumbent John Lindsay ahead in a three-man race. Other big cities with mayor's races include Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland. Bill Plant reports now on the contest in Cleveland, the first major city to break the color barrier to the top job at City Hall.
Sign all over!
The question might well be, what has this man got to sing about? Because bookmakers in Cleveland say it's just about an even bet that Carl Stokes will be the first black man to become former mayor of a large American city.
The people of Cleveland are sick and tired of being afraid on the streets and in their homes.
Stokes' opponent, Ralph Peart, county auditor, and the first Republican to carry heavily Democratic Cuyahoga County in 30 years. But an even greater problem for Stokes is the widespread belief among white middle-class voters that he is favoring blacks at the expense of the white community. The mayor denies this, but the racial issue remains paramount. The most damaging incident for the Stokes administration was the shootout between police and black militants over a year ago. There were 7 dead, 3 of them policemen. In an attempt to calm the riot that followed, the mayor pulled white police out of the ghetto, something for which the police force has never forgiven him. These 3 Cleveland policemen agreed to talk with CBS News on the condition that their identities remain secret. They believe that their views are held by a vast majority of the men on the department.
The black militant feels that since Mayor Stokes is mayor of this city, he has an open license to do whatever he wants. And if a police officer stops him, arrests him, or talks to him, he gets pampered, coddled, and gets just to slide out of anything he gets involved in.
Stokes, quite aware of the combined police racial issue, talks to a group of new policemen.
If you encounter a law-breaking hoodlum, you arrest him. I don't care if his father is a banker, a labor leader, or a civil rights activist. If he's breaking that law, you take him to jail. And I'll back you up all the way. And I would have only one final admonition to you. You enforce the law. I'll take care of politics.
But both sides admit that many Cleveland policemen are politicking actively against Stokes. They blame his policies for a sharp rise in the crime rate and a serious decline in police morale.
The people of Cleveland are sick and tired of the mayor's meddling with the police department. Don't you agree?
Stokes has, among other things, come up with one traditional response to the problem of rising crime: more streetlights. But the high incidence of violent crime in the downtown area continues, and the section is largely deserted at night. Stokes' major showcase has been the Cleveland Now program, an effort to raise more than $11 million for projects ranging from housing rehabilitation to youth employment. But the effort is undermined by white mistrust of Stokes. Workers on this project reflect the widespread belief in the white community that Stokes is spending too much in the ghetto.
We've been working down here for quite a couple of years now, quite some time. And we haven't had any jobs where it is the white area. I mean, we don't have no trouble down here or nothing, but it's just that these people are getting all the funds and nobody else is getting the funds.
For Stokes, the critical question is the percentage of his vote from white areas like this. Ralph Perk is a Czech, and 40% of Cleveland's population is of Slavic origin. Perk's chances depend on a large turnout. Stokes does manage to project a relaxed image. But he remembers that in 1967, with 95% of the black vote, he only managed to win by 1,600 votes. And black voter registration is down this year. A newspaper poll gives Stokes a narrow lead, but calls the race a toss-up. Stokes has been trying to get Perk to debate. Perk has refused, admitting that Stokes is the better debater. But they met accidentally one afternoon.
I knew I was going to find you one day. Good to see you. Hello, Ralph.
What's happening? Tell me you quit campaigning.
Well, I don't. Against you, since I can't get you on a platform, there's no need in. Why don't you meet me on a debate? One place, just one time.
I saw in the paper you're canceling all your appointments. You're not even going on radio. You're not going on TV.
Will you meet me one time? Will you meet me one time? Let's go back in here, Ralph, and have 15 minutes.
You go back. I just had my half hour, my friend, and
why won't you meet me?
See if you can do better.
Don't you think you ought to say these things to me, Faith? Let's have it right now. Will you record this? Repeat the things you said while I'm standing here.
Listen, friend, I come here to shake hands. I have a meeting at 2 o'clock. Take care of yourself.
Ralph, I still like you.
Well, you want to.
Nice cap, and we love you.
Cleveland has the problems of all large cities, perhaps in even greater degree. A central Stokes campaign theme is that after years of inactivity by city government, he has gotten Cleveland moving again.
I don't say that Carl Stokes has done everything. I wish I could do everything. But I've done a whole lot of things.
Let's all repeat that together. His promise has been Cleveland now, but his performance has let Cleveland down. His promise has been Cleveland now, but his performance has let Cleveland down.
Democrats generally don't have much trouble winning elections in Cleveland, and Carl Stokes is a Democrat. But this is the first time that a black man is taking his record as mayor of a major city back to the people. And in this election, despite the concern with law and order, taxes, and spending, the cutting issue is reduced to one: the fact that Carl Stokes is black. Bill Plant, CBS News, Cleveland.
In Washington today, the operations director of the Federal Home Loan Bank Board was shot to death in his office, apparently by an angry co-worker. Police said 54-year-old Clark Fauvert was killed following an argument during an office conference. They charged his special assistant, Samuel Welch, with murder. Welch is 63. The averages generally were lower on the New York Stock Exchange today. Volume was 11,100,000 shares. The New York Exchange Index lost 4 cents, and the American Index was down 6 cents.
These are killers, battery killers. Their weapons, flashlights and toys. So Eveready created a battery that's harder to kill. The new Eveready Super 99 gives twice the energy of ordinary batteries in the standard heavy-duty test for only a few pennies more. Super 99, the battery that doesn't know when to quit. That's power to spare from the Eveready powerhouse. Ever ready. want a battery that's not?
Pat Hernan here at the Union Carbide Laboratories, where the big news in antifreeze is the new anti-leak formula for Prestone. Scientists have developed the one anti-leak formula good enough for Prestone, America's #1 brand. You can get the new anti-leak formula in the famous can or this new plastic handy jug. Now science makes Prestone protection better than ever. Get Prestone antifreeze with the new anti-leak formula.
The chief of the National Guard Bureau, Major General Winston Wilson, is asking the nation's 500,000 guardsmen to stage a counter-demonstration against war protest activities later this month. Wilson, in a written appeal, asked that between November 11th and 16th, guardsmen drive their cars with their headlights on, leave their porch lights burning, and fly the American flag at their homes and offices. Now to Washington for some thoughts from Eric Sevareid about President Nixon's report to the nation on Vietnam. Eric?
Commanders-in-chief don't normally tell their country and the whole world how they plan to prosecute a war, save in general terms. Richard Nixon, as Commander-in-Chief, finds himself obliged to tell the country and the world how he plans to give up prosecuting the Vietnam War, and in rather specific terms. He is in this unhappy condition because he inherited a war that had gone on too long and too fruitlessly, because he claimed the presidency last year with the assurance that he had a plan, and because popular opinion at home is now a bigger problem than the communist enemy abroad. The interest in tonight's speech is especially intense because he announced it 3 weeks ago, and that long period produced at least 1 million words of advice and prophecy. The overall question is whether the speech will enable him to finesse the impatient opposition and gain more time, or will prove a general letdown. If the latter, his wounds will have been self-inflicted. Whatever this address is, what it is not is another pastiche assembled by staff people. He has personally sweated over this one harder than over anything save his convention acceptance speech and his inaugural. At this hour, speculation about the contents is fruitless and probably a disservice both to the president and his audience. Communication is a two-way transaction. He must not only speak clearly, people must listen clearly, straining his words through as thin a filter of pre-established emotions as possible. Walter?
And that's the way it is. Monday, November 3rd, 1969. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.